Thank you very much, Pura Vida. Good evening. How are you guys? So, first and foremost, I want to thank HRF and Thor Halverson for getting us together, involved in the fight for freedom. He has been working on this for 20 years, and we will not be here, and the Reynolds Foundation will not be here without his intellectual powerhouse, without his energy, and above all, without his sacrifice. So thank you, Thor, whatever you are. And thank you to the Reynolds Foundation team and Alex Glastein and Celine and Javier that for many, many years we have these conversations and these discussions that created this paper I'm going to present with you today in 9 minutes, if everything goes well. Javier and Sara show you the method, and Julia remind us who we are fighting for. So by now, the case of Freedom Philanthropy is clear, and yet less than 1 penny of every charitable dollar goes to defending freedom. Let me start with a concrete example, what that looks like in practice. If one of the most repressed countries in our hemisphere, an organization we support to the Reynolds Foundation in running a coordinated multi-year operation, we invested first in leadership in exile, a strategic coaching for freedom actors outside of the country, backed by a knowledge network spanning from Stanford to Cornell to Oxford and others. Second, digital information penetration within the autocracy, a campaign supported by Bitcoin and using encrypted channels that the regime cannot freeze. Third, on-the-ground effort to direct support to families of political prisoners, keeping civic society alive. And this organization, I'm reserving their name for obvious reasons, isn't operating in isolation. We all know autocrats share repression playbooks across borders, and our network portfolio of resistance is doing the same, connecting leaders, data technology, and strategic actors in countries so what works in one place accelerates freedom in the next. With this QR code, you can read the complete paper which this talk is going to be based on. I'm just going to give you 4 to 5 slides and some graphs. The case for Freedom Philanthropy is already being made in practice. What we lack is the shared language to do it, everywhere and at scale. Before it's too late, we need to have shared language. That is what tonight is about. Approximately $900 billion going to philanthropic giving annually. Education receives 25 times more than freedom and democracy. Health receives 17 times more. And even animal welfare attracts more philanthropic dollars. And I don't have a problem with that. But those philanthropic streams are not attacking the systematic problem, which is the rise of tyranny. This is not a problem of scarcity. It is a problem of capital allocation. Freedom has been treated as a moral preference rather than a productive asset. That mispricing, after long talks with my friend Tim Reynolds, is what brought us here tonight. Building the institutions that sustain freedom and democracy takes decades. Destroying them can take days. In India, a single administrative order froze Amnesty International bank accounts and shut down operations overnight. More than 20,000 NGO licenses have been revoked since 2014. In Nicaragua, the Ortega regime has dissolved more than 5,600 organizations, seized university assets, including the campus of Incaya Business School, where I used to teach, and actually I was a student when Professor Fukuyama was teaching there. And they revoked the legal status of an entire Jesuit university. The strategy is deliberate: impoverish every institution capable of independent thought and action. Authoritarian regimes have learned that financial repression is cheaper than violence and harder to see. AI now helps them to accelerate this through surveillance, censorship, and predictive policing. Our friends at the National Endowment for Democracy are building the financial immune system to route around it, a payment infrastructure for capital where normal banking is blocked, surveilled, or weaponized. The asymmetry, guys, is structural. It will not be reversed by emergency interventions. It requires a smart, patient, long-term capital. And our hypothesis is that this capital has to come from private philanthropy. Foundations, 1, 2, donors advice funds, and 3, family offices. Smart, long-term, patient capital. But we have a vocabulary problem. What does freedom philanthropy mean? Those two words are beautiful, and paired together are even more beautiful. Freedom philanthropy. The etymology is simple. Philos, loving a friend. Anthropos, human being. So philanthropy is love for humankind. And freedom is living without coercion, choosing your own path in life as long as you do not harm others. Most will agree with those definitions. But freedom philanthropy suffers from a vocabulary problem. Investors have a shared language. Returns of investment, risk, diversification, allocation. That language creates discipline and comparability. And it moves capital. Freedom philanthropy has no equivalent. Freedom philanthropy has no equivalent. It's a field that is defunded and barely exists. No way to measure returns. No way to compare interventions. No shared framework for deciding where to deploy. No one funds what they cannot measure. And billions sit on the sideline because the language to move it does not yet exist. If I learn one thing from Winston Churchill, is this: language mobilizes. Language wins wars. And language can move capital. We believe that if we coordinate freedom philanthropy the way we coordinate an investment portfolio, we will get systemic returns. But that requires three things: the data, the Tyranny Tracker exists; the projects, we are building the portfolio of projects; and a shared vocabulary, and that takes everyone in this room. In finance, the concept of alpha serves to measure excess return, the value generated beyond what the market provides on its own. So we're building Freedom Alpha. In your portfolios, your finance portfolios, you measure return on investment. In Freedom Philanthropy, in grant making, we need to have an equivalent word for that. Maybe return on grants. On one axis, democratic quality measured by frameworks like the Tyranny Tracker, and on the other one, time. One line is expected trajectory if we do nothing, right? And the other is what happens when we invest in coordination, in decentralized resistance, in civic society, in institutions, in rule of law, in property rights. The gap between them is the Freedom Alpha. This is why the Reynolds Foundation is investing in research centers at Oxford, Cornell, Maryland, Columbia, Stanford, and Maxwell, where my former mentor, Tina Nabachi, is leading one of those centers, because the data must be built, and we're building it. Frederick Hayek understood this 70 years ago. Freedom is not a luxury that follows prosperity. It's an infrastructure that creates it. Nobel Peace Prize research confirms it. 20% of GDP growth over 25 years when society is democratized. Freedom is not just a value. It's a productive asset with compounding returns. So, if freedom is a productive asset, how do you build a portfolio around it? It starts with leadership. As Tim always says, we need leaders who build projects, portfolio of projects. Projects that grow into organizations. And we call this at the Reynolds Foundation the Freedom Accelerator, a portfolio of leaders, projects, and organizations building a freer society. The accelerator operates across three independent layers: civic institutions, financial autonomy, and independent information. Imagine a frontline autocracy, a legal defense fund, a payment rail that cannot be frozen, a civic network that did not exist yesterday. These projects may fail more than often, but when they succeed, they shift an entire national trajectory. Highest risk, highest alpha. Imagine a transitional state, institutions still standing but eroding. Preventive investment, this is something that Max always says, preventive investment is always cheaper than reconstruction. Medium risk, medium alpha. And imagine a stable democracy that needs reinforcement. Durable freedom infrastructure that compounds quietly over decades. Lower risk, structural alpha. So for us, at the family office space and the foundation space, we're trying to classify our partners. These are new partners, new ventures. I'm from the University in Argentina, a partnership with another family office in Brazil and Colombia, from David Vélez from Newbank, a partnership with the National Endowment of Democracy to try to tap into systems that are not usable or feasible for other foundations to enter, like Syria, Iran, etc. And then we have established partnerships of years that we have been already decoding and unpacking and distilling. This is not just theory. Through the Oslo Freedom Forum and Bliss Summit, which is an invitational event convening the freedom ecosystem and the family offices, We have already mobilized millions of dollars from new family offices into those frameworks. That framework exists. The question is how we're going to expand the pie that funds it. It's only the same types of donors. We need to have more donors into that ecosystem. We're in the midst of the largest wealth transfer in human history. $124 trillion is moving to a new generation of potential philanthropists in the next decade. At the same time, the traditional pipeline of government funding from freedom and US democracy is running dry. US programming has been defunded, frozen, or eliminated. Organizations that sustain civil society across sectors for many years now are facing some type of collapse. Freedom and democracy decline, as we saw today, are a generational problem. They will not be reversed by emergency interventions. The infrastructure we're building at the Reynolds Foundation has 6 main components. 1, a data and diagnostic layer, for instance, the Tyranny Tracker. 2, a global research network across the world leading universities led by our very own Laura Ucros and Tracy Maddock. And trusted intermediaries like the Human Rights Foundation that can deploy capital on the front lines. AI-powered systems that detect authoritarian risk, price it accurately, and deploy coordinated capital faster. A diverse portfolio of frontline organizations in the most restricted countries on earth. And finally, the cultivation of the next generation philanthropic leaders, some of them tonight in this room, as freedom advocates that prepare to steward this capital with purpose, scientific rigor, but above all, discipline. The next generation of philanthropists in this room needs to step into because freedom is so important right now. It's the most important asset we can invest. We have to do it boldly. Why? Today, as I said, less than 1% of philanthropy touches freedom. Imagine moving that to 10% in the next decade. This is not idealism. That is a market correction. So here's the case for freedom. The Tyranny Tracker tells you where freedom is most at risk. Freedom Alpha tells you whether your grant is working. The Freedom Accelerator portfolio approach tells you where and how to allocate. And as my friend Tim says, without liberty, no markets. And without markets, no wealth creation. What remains is the capital to fund it and partners to build it. Both are in this room tonight. So what we're proposing today is, let's create a common language for freedom philanthropy. Let's create a common language for freedom philanthropy. Let's create a measurement framework, Freedom Alpha, better measurements. We don't have the answers, but we're trying to ask the right questions. Let's redefine freedom not as a moral preference, but an infrastructure with compounding returns. AI and freedom technology as the frontier we must build before autocrats weaponize it first. And the call to move the needle from 1% to 10% in the next 10 years. And the tools exist. The capital exists. The question is whether we will use them. We're starting in a building that was constructed as an answer to destruction. Look around this room, the researchers, the activists, the philanthropists, the funders, the people who say yes to being here tonight. Freedom is infrastructure. Say it until it changes what gets funded. Because the question is not whether freedom is worth defending. The question is whether we will be the generation that finally funds it, measures it, and protects it. We get to do this. This is a battle between good and evil, and I believe we're on the right side of history and we will win. Thank you very much.